This is Professor Susan Gillis, and this video will help you interview your client, Mr. Deckler, in class. This video introduces you to the three-step model of interviewing and also explains the funnel technique of interviewing a client. Let's look at the first stage, problem identification. You should begin by greeting your client. It's important to establish a rapport because you may have to ask your client embarrassing or upsetting questions during the interview. It's also important to identify your client's problem. Here, Mr. Deckler has been sued by Ms. Parsons over an accident in New York. You also want to find out what your client's desired outcome is. Does Mr. Deckler simply want to settle the case? Or what other outcome is he interested in? You also need to work out your client's ideas about the case. In an ideal client-lawyer relationship, the client's ideas are taken into account as the lawyer develops the strategy. You also want to find out if your client has other concerns. For instance, if Mr. Deckler planned to retire to Florida, making litigating a case in New York difficult. Finally, you should give your client a brief explanation of how you plan to conduct the interview. Your client needs to know that you may have to repeat questions in order to clarify their statements, and you may have to delve into embarrassing or upsetting topics. We're going to presume that most of the preliminary problem identification step has occurred and focus in class on the next step, eliciting a timeline. When you interview your client, it's important to get a timeline of events. You need to get the big picture first. Why? If you start by asking specific questions, there's a danger that your client won't recognize what's important and will omit crucial facts. So by asking the client to give you a timeline of the events, you'll gain the big picture of what happened to your client. So questions like, can you describe to me what happened the day of the accident? Or starting with when you got up in the morning, walk me through what occurred that day. Elicit a timeline of the event. Your next stage is to develop your legal theory. You need to know what's the claim, what the defenses are, why. Because once you know the legal theories at issue in the case, you can work out what the key facts are, and you can question your client about the key facts and any other details you need for the answer. So plan your questioning based on the legal elements you need to prove or disprove. Here you've been likely sued for negligence. Therefore, you want to ask your client about key facts that go to each of the elements of the negligence claim or any defenses you may have to such a claim. Now let's take a look at how to use the funnel technique to question your client. You want to spend most of your time up here at the top of the funnel asking broad, open-ended questions, and very little time right at the end asking closed questions. Let's take a look. So remember, the first broad, open-ended question you're going to ask is to elicit a timeline from your client. Once you've elicited the timeline, then for each topic which you've identified as key, you're going to ask broad, open-ended questions. Who, what, when, why. For instance, when did you first see Miss Parsons? We're still up here asking broad, open-ended questions. Only when you've got the timeline and explored with open-ended questions what the client can tell you about crucial topics in the case, do you want to move down the funnel and start asking clarifying questions and finally close-ended questions. Clarifying questions are designed to check that you correctly understand what your client is telling you about the facts. So you should first ask summary questions. For instance, so when you first saw Miss Parsons, she was in the road? Is that correct? This still gives the client a chance to continue their narrative and fill in missing information or correct any misunderstandings. Only when you believe you've clarified your client's narrative should you ask close-ended questions, yes or no, one-fact questions. For instance, so Miss Parsons was in the road, is that correct? I hope you can use this technique to successfully interview your client in class. What follows is a video designed by the ABA which shows lawyers using the funnel technique to interview children. After you have watched this video, remember to take a look at the handout on TWEN on how to interview your client on Wednesday. Thanks very much.
Method called the funnel technique to encourage the child to give their account of what happened and to develop facts important to the case.
Asking open-ended questions, letting the kid run with it, and then following up with narrow questions. And I find it to be extremely effective.
In the first stage of the funnel technique, the lawyer allows the child to tell the story uninterrupted. In the second stage, the lawyer asks open-ended questions to further develop facts. In the third stage, the lawyer confirms facts through a series of narrow, close-ended questions. Here is an example of the first stage, where the lawyer allows his client to speak uninterrupted.
So, why don't you tell me what happened when Oscar got hit?
There was one particular game we all wanted to play, which was called WrestleMania. And you throw the person in a body slam by throwing them onto the floor. And then, out of nowhere,
I let them tell me the story at least once, if not more times, all the way through without my asking any questions.
It shows the child that you're going to let them speak, that you're not going to cut them off, that you don't discredit their story because they're a child. But it also begins to reveal to you their view, where they're sitting in this whole narrative, in this whole story, their perspective on it, what's important to them.
Stage 2 of the funnel technique is your chance to track back through the story using open-ended questions starting with who, what, where, when, why, and how to clarify the story and continue to develop facts.
Okay. So, let's go over that again slowly so I can understand each part. When did it all start?
It was like a month ago. Me and my brother were staying with our foster mom, Deirdre. And we had seen a show on TV called WrestleMania.
Oh, what's WrestleMania?
WrestleMania is when you throw the person in a body slam by throwing them onto the floor.
Tell me more about that. Does it hurt?
No, because we had put pillows down on top of the rug that was in the room. So when you fell down, it didn't really hurt that much. And we were all doing it to each other. I mean, Oscar was doing it too, so.
Yeah?
Yeah, and then Shorty got mad because he said we had thrown him down too hard, and he picked up a bat, and he had hit Oscar with the bat. And that was it. And the police came.
What did Shorty do with the bat?
He had poked Oscar in the stomach with it.
Poked?
Yeah, poked.
And what happened to Oscar?
Oh, well, Oscar sort of fell down holding his stomach, crying.
Can you show me what Shorty did?
Yeah, he picked up a bat and said he threw me down too hard, and he poked him in the stomach with it.
Well, how soon?
Open-ended questions just allow the child to tell you what's most important to him. What did the child notice and observe?
Stage 3 of the funnel technique takes place deeper into the client relationship. The lawyer has already heard each of the following facts from the child and is using narrow questions to reconfirm and clarify the facts that are most legally relevant to the case.
Did they leave you in that room?
Yes.
Did they leave you in there for a long time?
Yes.
How long?
It felt like forever, maybe a few hours.